Anyway, well, good morning, and thanks for having me back to present yet another senior moment, right? The reason it's called the senior moment will become clear shortly.
I need to get this closer to you.
Okay, fine. I can stand closer to you.
You can't. I don't want to bother you.
Okay. Anyway, if you deal much with creationists, especially if you're speaking to them about evolution, you'll hear the argument, kind of a tired argument, that complex things do not arise from simple things, that it violates the second law of thermodynamics. And that turns out not to be the case. And the reason this is a senior moment is I'm not going to discuss that at all, okay? But I do like the idea of complex things arising from simplicity. So I have gone somewhere else. You remember a couple of months ago, Mike gave a presentation saying we should all have fun in our lives.
Yeah.
Well, part of the fun in my life is my hobbies. And this arises from my hobbies, and one of my hobbies. And not to scare anybody, but rather than coming from the world of evolution, I'm going to take an example of complexity arising from simplicity from the world of mathematics. Specifically, I'm going to look at a construct called the Mandelbrot set that you may or may not be aware of. But I'll tell you a little bit about it. It starts with something very simple and ends up with one of the most complex things in mathematics. Basically, it starts with a recipe or an algorithm which says take a number, any number, and square it and then add it back to itself. That's the algorithm. Then you repeat it, you square your result and add back to itself, do that repeatedly. An example, let's say we took the number 1. Well, if we square it, we get 1, and if we add it back to itself, we get 2. If we square that, we get 4, and add it back in, we get 5. And then 25, 26, and then it goes to 600 and something, the number gets big. If we take the number -2, if we square it, we get 4, and add it to itself, we get 2. -2 and 4 is 2. And if we square that, we get 4, and add it to itself, and we get 2. And we can do that forever. And that's pretty boring, right? If we take the number -1 and square it, we get 1. And add it back to itself, we get 0. Square that, we get 0. And add it back to itself, we get -1. And basically, we bounce around between -1 and 0, back and forth, back and forth. Well, it turns out that if you take any of the numbers, one of two things will happen. Either ultimately, doing that procedure will grow to infinity. You'll get a very large number, like we did with the 1, or it will be bound. It won't get big. And it turns out that all of the numbers between -2 and 0.25 satisfies that. Well, that's pretty boring too. But if you look at some other numbers, namely the complex numbers, the ones that lie in a plane where the vertical axis is, quote, the imaginary axis. I hate that term. There's nothing imaginary about these numbers. And if you play this game and square them, you will ultimately come up with this thing. Can someone turn off the lights? That would be cool. That's great. Okay. Anyway, you get this thing. It looks sort of like a bug. And in the black bug, in this thing, this goes from -2 to 2 and -1.5 to 1.5. Everything that's black has the characteristic that if you go through this iteration repeatedly, those things don't run off to infinity. Everything that's white does. Well, there's not much to be said about that until you notice that there's some funny looking things here that, some spots. Well, they're part of the set too, and I'll just zoom in on some just because I can. And you'll see that it looks like something weird is going on. They're repeating again, okay, which is kind of interesting. Or if we take a little teeny weeny, if we look right at the edge, there's some strange things going on. and it's hard to say quite what's going on. But this guy named Benoit Mandelbrot investigated this set, and it's got his name. And the thing that's interesting about the set is not the set itself, but is the boundary. Now, if you remember your high school calculus, you'll remember that one of the ways you can find out whether a curve is well behaved or not well behaved is by computing its slope. And for instance, in this curve, over on the left-hand portion, it's got a positive slope, it's rising. Over here, it's got a negative slope that kind of changes. But at this point, right on the top, the slope is not defined. It doesn't know whether it wants to go positive or negative. Well, Mandelbrot showed that with his set, that the boundary of the set had no point at which the slope is defined. It is changing so rapidly that you can't define a slope anywhere on it. As a result, it means if you zoom in on the edge, the more and more and more that you zoom in, it never gets smooth. It still goes crazy. So a way to describe these, and this is why I'm doing the community moment and why I thought it was fun, is you can get some very, very pretty pictures. We're going to jump to color for a moment. And in this case, the colors describe the number of iterations that went on before it tried to escape to infinity. And again, I can do some zooms like I did before. And you see some strange things. I can turn off.
One of his hobbies.
This is one of my hobbies. But anyway, and we can make some pretty pictures out of it. This little program is just running away, having fun with itself. But I will now just jump right ahead and show you some pictures I've made out of this thing. If I can read my... for starters, if I went on that set, I'll pull him back up for a second, and went right out here and went down this little valley that's out here. I can zoom down that thing and away we go. I've already computed some of these things and I have these pictures, so I'll show that that's it zoomed up. And then as we go through it, I'm going down the little hole, and then I go down and I find that thing, and in the middle is this, and
Rabbit hole.
yep.
Yeah.
And it goes farther, and right down in the middle of this eye thing, as we zoom way in, we get this whole set all over again, which is kind of cute. Anyway, these pictures are kind of pretty, and I thought I would just show you a bunch of them and then quit. Which Yay! Here's some fractal images that I've said. I actually started playing with fractals in 1986, and I wrote my first program that displayed them and did a computation. In fact, I'll jump down here if I can find it. I computed this fractal right here on a VAX 780. It took just over 10 hours to compute. This little program that I have running on my laptop, which I wrote, can compute it in 2 seconds. So things have changed. But anyway, I will just show some of the pretty pictures, and then what I will do is I will put this thing off in the corner and people can look at it go during the coffee break if they want, or if they don't want it. It doesn't matter. But anyway, there are things that look like elephants or bugs or...
Wait, and the colors are indicative of how many iterations of the
how many iterations it took before it escaped. Now, none of these things, if it's colored, it has not escaped. You know, this is not... No, excuse me, if it's colored, it has escaped. None of these colors belong to the set. They're just looking...
The colors are how long it took for that particular
exactly.
pixels calculation to get out of it.
And the black has not escaped.
And the blacks have not escaped, right. But anyway, you can find nearly anything you want in this set. You know, there's some bugs kissing. or some weird and bizarre things, and I'll just click through some of them because they take forever.
Oh,
You can find some strange things in there. Chandeliers, if you like them, lots of Christmas ornaments. Anyway, I have a couple of hundred of these here, and we're not going to go through them all. But I'll set up and let it run. It's just something very, very complex. You can imagine the curve that twists around to make these things, you know. They're a bunch of eyeballs, if you like them. But anyway, I thought it was pretty, and I thought y'all might enjoy it. So.